Hey everybody, welcome to episode 64 of Tactical Crouch. We're a competitive Overwatch podcast, and I'm KickedTripod, joined of course by Yiska and Volamel. Good to see you guys, looking good. Nice little, wow, that was a coordinated salute. That was amazing. Audio listeners, you don't know what you're missing. We do have a guest on the episode, though, this week, and of course, we want to jump right into that. Head coach for the Atlanta Reign, and my personal hero, Brad Sephy Rajani. Welcome to the show, Sephy.
No way you just said that.
I did. I mean, so when it comes, so there is an aspect, and I've said this. I used to do like a casual Overwatch podcast before I got really into Overwatch esports. And a big part of it, every week we were talking about selfless gaming and like way back in the day. And I was just like, yeah. And I was just like, Brad Rajani, like he gets it, like selfless Brad, like that's the dude. He keeps building these great rosters. I'm all about it, and I was really excited. I'm gonna pull the clip because I think that you don't believe me, but I'm
he definitely.
I'm just skeptical of how much you're hyping it up.
I'm not. I probably am guilty of overhyping. This is not one of those moments, but really happy to have you on the show, and thanks for dealing with my scuffed room. I wish I had my nice studio ready instead of just cables everywhere, except under my desk, by the way. Yeah.
Nah, it's all good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for coming
on. We've got really great questions and stuff lined up. We're gonna do the housekeeping really quick, and then we're gonna just jump right in. First and foremost, our show is supported completely by our patrons and our subs, and that's it. So if you like the show, subscribe right here, twitch.tv/KickedTripod, or go to patreon.com/tacticalcrouch. It's a great way to support the show. We really appreciate it. Just like right now, 11 a.m. Pacific time, we record the show live at twitch.tv/KickedTripod. And last but not least, you can find it everywhere that you can listen to podcasts. So iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Google Podcasts. It's everywhere. If you can't find it, you are dumb. Sorry.
Well, now, come on now.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you can't find it,
try a little bit harder.
How can you not find it? There's just no way you can't find it. Thanks for being here, though. Let's jump into Yiska. Yiska, I'm gonna let you just I feel like you're a bull.
Did I give you the stinky eye?
I feel like you're a bull. I think you feel like you're a bull in a cage right now. I just need to let you loose and get started.
No, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You're good? You have nothing to say?
No, I have definitely a resting phase that doesn't let you think we're good, but I'm good.
I think they just got to him. Yiska, blink twice if you need help.
That's the thing. Don't need to blink. It's already. I'm staring into the void intently.
Oh,
all right.
Man. All right.
You're good.
All right. Joe, you good, man? So you got some coffee in there?
I'm good. Yeah, got some coffee. Hydrating. Ready to chat with Brad and see, what's coming on the horizon for 2020, because it's I've talked about this on other shows. That this is kind of like we're finally releasing the Overwatch League. Like, this is what it's supposed to be. This is what we were kind of promised after 2 seasons of basically beta testing.
Mm-hmm.
We're here. This is what we were promised, and we've got a head coach on to kind of talk about the internals of what it looks like from the trenches. So I'm jazzed to see what he has to say.
And honestly, with a lineup that now it's my time to kind of cozy up, but I don't do that if that's not in the roster. That definitely should be considered a top 5 team. I think I will have them in my final power rankings, just based on the final season standings, of course, of last season, and then that has to factor into your reasoning. But also the pickups have been great, I think, personally, and arguably, while I thought, for instance, that a team like Seoul would have chances to be above there, I don't think they made the moves. And for instance, Atlanta excites me way more now than Seoul does.
Interesting. That's weird coming from the Prophet fanboy himself.
Yeah.
Gotta hire
I
some
feel
better
like
talent
a
then.
team that signs Profit is immediately just like a +5 on the power rankings for you, but apparently not. I mean, this is probably a perfect segue then. Brad, I mean, the Atlanta Rain have had a pretty like expectation shattering 2019. If at least if you went by like how people kind of rated the Atlanta Rain.
Yeah, we had like the highest deviation from our preseason power rankings. Pretty
Yeah.
much. Most everyone, I don't know, maybe there's a few teams that did more like Chengdu or something, right? But like we were definitely the one that exceeded it by a lot. Yeah.
I think it was you and Hangzhou. Hangzhou
Spark.
were pretty close.
Right.
So like, I have to ask you first. Like, do you have a reason? Like, do you have an idea in your head of like why you were just so underrated in 2019? Because it seems like a pretty big miss. It seems obvious always in hindsight, though, right?
Well, I think across the board, the public tends to overrate veteran players. And of course, the Atlanta Rain has 0 like Overwatch League veterans from season 1, right? Was there a single player on our team that played in season 1?
The only one that I can think of is Baby Bay, but he came later on.
But he came later, right?
Yeah.
So starting off in the season, we basically had a bunch of newbies in there, right? From contenders, and then DeFran, whose experience was like pre Overwatch League, right? But yeah, so we just didn't have those season 1 names on the team, and I think across the board, people just tend to rate veteran players very, very highly. And you'll see it this season too. But yeah, I think that was the biggest reason. It's just people sleep on contenders players. A lot of these 17-year-olds that become 18-year-olds, they're very good at the game. And we knew that going in. And when we were scouting our players, Pogpo, Daco, and Erster were the first 3 players that we picked up. We picked them up in one fell swoop, and they had all just turned 18. This was the first season they were even eligible to play. So yeah, I just think it's a big case of that for the most part.
What about? I mean, Sorry, go ahead, Yiska. Yeah, go ahead.
To be fair, I don't think that was the underrated part of your roster, right? It was more like questions about the backline. Even though if people paid attention to Masa, I think that was definitely a person that was going to be up there. I think the other positions also like. It's just, I think one thing that also played in a lot of people's minds was like the DeFran signing and the necessity for him to pop off, I suppose. But then again, like you kind of have to always evaluate how willing organizations are to make mid-season changes and also their ability to make them. And with, you being a new franchise, there was really no precedent to know, do they have the funds? Do they have the willingness? Do they have the ability to, make quick decisions based on that? And I think that my thinking definitely was too much focused on like DeFran working out. And even though he kind of did for the beginning and then retired, it didn't seem to matter that much.
Yeah, a lot of it, I would agree with that. I think a lot of it was around the idea that maybe Atlanta's trying from the outset to build around him, and it looks like that wasn't the case, and it very obviously wasn't. Now that we can see that. No,
he was the last person added to the team at the very end. We started really with our tank line. Is the first place we started.
Interesting.
And then the supports and DPS came later. But
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, not in terms of the actual in terms of the actual signings, right? Like I said, the first 2 people signed were Pokpo, Daco, and Erster all at the same time, right? And as a new org and as a Western org with Western coaching staff, scoring 3 Korean players, including basically kind of superstar names that had multiple offers, and getting them to come to Atlanta, it was not easy to pull off, but the ownership of the Atlanta Rain was really, I don't think any other ownership group could have done what we did, like Erster. I think Erster had something like 5 offers, when he accepted ours. And part of that was making sure that we got Pokpo and Dako on board as well, right? Because he wanted to be able to come with people that he knew, that he had played with, right? Like in Korean Contenders. I mean, he didn't play in Korean Contenders, but he's in Korea. You know what I mean? He'd played in Korea. He knew these players. They knew him, right? They were friends. So, you kind of had to like make an aggressive move there, and the ownership of the Atlanta Reign really stepped up in that moment, and it basically gave us the foundation to build a strong roster around that. And then, to touch back on what Yiska was saying is, he thought Seoul would get all the star talent, you know what I mean, all the star Korean talent coming into the season. It's true that a lot of players wanted to base out of Seoul, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the number one consideration that every player goes through when they're thinking about what team they want to sign to, other than having like a fair paycheck, right, is who am I going to be playing with?
Mm-hmm.
They want to have confidence in the teammates that they're signing up to play with. So you ask any player when they're looking to sign to your roster, the very first question they ask, or the biggest question on their mind, is always, who are my teammates going to be? What can you tell me about the roster that you're building, right? Because they have their own opinions about who they think is good and bad. And they want to make sure that they're playing with players that they respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we made some offseason acquisitions on Atlanta, but because we had a good season 1 or a good season 2, our good first season in season 2, right? We sort of had some credibility. And then we went over there with our contenders team and we popped off in the gauntlet. That gave us even more credibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, all of a sudden, players like Edison, like Sharp, look at our team and they say, wow, yeah, these guys actually know what they're doing and these players are actually good. If I join that team, I won't have to travel 12 hours on a plane in order to go get spawn camped in some foreign country and come home to jet. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like that. It's going to be way more fun and way more enjoyable than that. I'm going to actually come into the league and maybe win, So that's a big part of their thought process, Nobody wants to travel 12 hours to get spawn camped. Nobody wants to do that.
I can't imagine that being a career highlight for anybody, especially, after waiting this long to kind of get into the thick of things. So yeah, that's got to be pretty rough.
Speaking of travel, like that's one thing that I'm very interested in, because I feel like I've talked to people, and at some point there was this concept that I saw come from multiple people, where I thought, okay, someone must have communicated that via email, because a phrase like that doesn't stick that often that people use it. And it was mean and lean. Basically, like referring to the roster size and especially the entourage you're traveling with. So are you going to take everyone with you on the road, like the entire coaching staff and like all the players all the time? Have you figured that out yet?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Like, we haven't figured it out all the way, but I don't think it's really, if you have a 12-man roster, right? I don't think it's like it's entirely like, I don't think it's like totally responsible to take the entire 12-man roster on the road if you can avoid it. It's traveling every single week, which would burn out people. And, if it burns out the starters doing that, imagine what it would do to your bench players, you know what I mean, that are used to sitting at home on their computer and not traveling every weekend, you know what I mean? So I don't even think that they would enjoy it, that they would want to. They might want to go to a few, you know what I mean, if they're on the bench, maybe a big hype event or like a really cool place that they wanted to go, right? But they wouldn't want to go to every single one. They'd rather keep honing their game instead, right? Staying back and working on their skills, not traveling. So they want a gun for that starting spot, So no, I don't think we'll take the entire team on the road for every single homestand. There may be a few homestands where we do take the entire team, just to make everybody know that they're part of the team and included, and we'll probably pick the coolest one and take the whole team, right? But it won't be every single one, no way. Yeah.
It's got to be a balance, right? Because like it's really easy to be like the combination of like how can I improve as a player, how can I find that spot, and how can I make the Atlanta Reign franchise better at the same time. Be like, but how can I be involved and how can I be there in case like something goes wrong and I need to play or whatever. And I think a lot of people are holding on to the well, what if somebody gets sick? What if somebody dies in a Vespa scooter crash or whatever it ends up being?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of technical reasons too, and there's a couple of technical details. So number one, if somebody gets sick, if you know far enough in advance, like let's say they get sick like on the plane ride over, and you know right away, you could, on an emergency basis, right, scramble a plane ticket for the backup and try to get them out there in time, right? But there's also the fact that, and basically, there's like minimum requirements that the teams have to provide, like practice facilities, right, in each city, and those requirements don't really accommodate like 15 computers, right? Enough for 12 players plus staff. So you'll have to have people bring in laptops, and like they can only do so much, right? A host team can only accommodate a team visiting, to a certain extent. Can they really provide for like 2 full rosters, right, to get playtime? If they can't, and if people are just kind of tagging along but not actually having a computer to sit down and play at, one of the benefits of having like a 12-man roster or a deep roster is the idea that you could schedule like an internal scrim, right, maybe for the warm-up. And with unpredictable schedules and different time zones and things like that, can you really, if you just take like your main team and you try to get like a warm-up scrim on a match day or something like that, can you really find a scrim partner if it's a weird time zone and there's not a lot of teams, or the teams that are in that time zone, they're all at the event with you? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether you'll get that warm-up scrim or not. So having like your bench players back at home at their PCs ready to warm you up and maybe mimic the style of the opponent or something like that, pull out the strategies that you think your opponent's going to play that day. Being able to do that, have them at their PCs, it's kind of like a tactical advantage, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Interesting thing about you guys was, and I felt like that was pretty obvious, but overall, like we're having this discussion about currently, like what is the value of contenders and what's really the value for academy teams when there's no, like, you're not making money off the academy team because you're not making back the salaries of the rosters and whatnot. But you guys seem to have such a strong tie between your academy team, then also incorporating even some players in as much as the Overwatch League playoffs. You've like, I had the feeling you were also pretty involved with them, especially like at Gauntlet. Is there like, and by the way, there's also a cool rule change, I think, that where you are now allowed to have 4 two-way players, I think, next season. Like, I guess twofold questions. Do you think that interaction between your main team and the academy team will be possible on the road? And also the other one, do you see the possibility that there is once again this, like just sending players down to the academy team where they're not really necessarily decaying in skill, if we're being honest, but just playing, staying warm, and then also because sometimes contenders teams are ahead of patch or whatnot, just like in shape for the occurring meta?
It's a really difficult question, and there was a lot of stuff in what you just said. So I'll try to unpack it piece by piece. I guess number one, just starting off with like the value of academy. So for us, our academy team obviously performed the best out of all the Western teams this last academy season, right? Like we took second place at the Gauntlet. I was there with the team. Yes, I was involved, definitely. Very involved with the academy team. It's very top heavy, the success of the contenders teams, basically. Like if you are one of the top 3 teams in Korea, or like the number 1 team from the West, then Overwatch League teams will hit you up and look to get your talented players onto their roster in the following season, right? So for us, like 3 or 4 of our guys had offers. Some of them had multiple offers, right? Like it really worked out for them. for the ones that are of age, right? The ones that are not old enough yet, unfortunately, they're losing, most of their teammates, and we have to fully rebuild, right? And that's not going to be easy, but we're working through it. But the success is very top heavy. If you are a team that wasn't in, say, the top 4 teams in the world, something like that, you look at contenders as basically like, what did we make that investment for? What did we really get out of that, right? Like it's if it was just to like develop players and get them into the league, or develop players and sell them into the league, a few teams still had success there, right? Like Fusion Uni, promoted 2 players?
Feels like it was more, I think. Promoted? Yeah, they promoted and then sold some, right?
They sold some too, right? So a lot of, and that's based on their success that they had, because they were one of the more successful teams, except for this last season, right? Like before that, they had a great run, right? Great reputation, right? Those players were hyped up for a long time. So, but yeah, it's just, there's only a few teams that actually managed to promote players into the league, and then a lot of teams don't, or they do, but some of that hasn't worked out so well. I think a lot of Mayhem Academy players, right, got into the league, and they haven't popped off yet. Yeah, they're working on it, but history is not fully written.
Me too,
yet.
by the way. Still working on popping off. Yeah.
I would think, for instance, one thing that's very interesting to me is, because you said it's so top heavy, like a team like Uprising Academy still has a surprising amount of promotions and
you're not wrong.
Plays right?
Yeah, that's true. You're not wrong at all. And I think even this upcoming season, Uprising Academy still is looking like a decent team. Like I think their system is working. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there are a few cases of teams getting value, and then there's a lot of cases of teams not getting value, I guess. But overall, like in general, there continues to be pretty good turnover in the league. So there's opportunities for contenders players to promote in. Not as many probably as you would like to see, but at the same time, there's only so many roster spots in the world. We can't promote it.
We're dropping out a little bit here on the audio. Sorry about that, guys. Brad, we still have you? Maybe not. We might have lost Brad.
Yeah. So, like,
what he's saying is the next 3 signings are no, just kidding. What
happens?
Yeah, no, I mean,
he'll be back. He'll be back.
Yeah, I mean that's why we're not even doing video, because we're not so sure about the internet quality. So, yeah, we're gonna.
I mean, he brings some he breathes a fresh life into the conversation around tier 2, because it is a little dismal, right? It's a little sad.
What I want to ask him.
Yeah.
What I want to ask him is, when he comes back, is like, do you see some, like, is the Chipsa movement concerning to him, as he's talking about, look at this guy who has created so many great Western rosters and talks about the importance of tier 2 and tier 3. Like, do you ever dip from other wells, and is that like healthy for the scene? So
yeah, that's also my concern, is that, like, there are ways to derive value that are monetary, directly monetary, such as like the way Atlanta acted, in the sense that they heavily utilized them as scrim partners, and just like integrated them into the system, right? Much more seamlessly than you could with even an affiliated team, right? Next season. So that is a question, but it's also like, why does it necessarily have to be monetarily, financially good, right? Like, in my understanding, we made decisions for contenders that would help Overwatch League first and foremost, in terms of sponsoring, in terms of like exposure, and that's fine if we have more money in the entire scene because of those decisions. But then you take that money that you made more instead of having a full circuit for contenders, especially, and then you support tier 2 that way, right? There are other things for that are prohibitive. By the way, that's a topic I don't want to speak too much on because that's a thing that's probably coming out tomorrow. That need to be amended in order for contenders to more seamlessly work and to make sense and to not actually hold careers back. And I'll have a talk about that. I have a pretty dope interview about that with Bench, and who, you know, as an agent has had first row seats to that spectacle. And other than that, like I kind of want to see, like I had this idea, for instance, to have every player have a buyout and use the buyouts from teams or from non-sponsored teams to help T2 in some way, for instance, right? Because
I think we might have Brad back. Hello?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
yes.
Sorry about that.
It's all good.
You were talking
worries.
about your least favorite player in Overwatch. Where were we, Yiska?
The value of contenders or academy teams in
So I
for
mean,
Overwatch.
I think Yiska made a good point about Boston. I mean, if you actually, I bet if you were to actually run the data, a fair number of players are promoted. So maybe the bottom line is just do a good job for him. You know, like, I mean, not everybody can win with the system, right? But you know, for us, we look at contenders as an opportunity to basically do a number of things. Number one, make sure that our scouting is comprehensive. Okay, so if we're excited about a player, like there's lots of players that you can get excited about, right? You can just go and stream and you can watch them pop off, right? But then if you really want to get to know the player and know whether they're built for the league long term, whether they have the mentality to be in the league, and the Overwatch League is a pretty grueling place to be, you know. One way to get to know that player, especially if they're young, you know, and not 18 yet, is to have them on your contenders team, right? You get to learn, okay, this person's mechanically gifted, but are they a player that I want on the main team? You know, you get to learn about their mentality, you know, all the mental aspects of their game, their discipline, their work ethic, all that stuff. You get to learn about that in contenders. And then you get to decide in the off season, do I want to promote this player? Or, you know, am I already solid on that position and do I want to let that player go somewhere else? But you basically have way more info. You have way more knowledge, you know? You know all the little things. And that stuff can make a big difference later. Then the second thing you can look at the contenders team for is basically like a really strong internal practice partner. In order to do that, you have to build a very strong team that can actually fight back against Overwatch League teams, right? But if you do manage to pull that off, being able to do the internal practices where you tell them, hey, you know, can you run this comp on this map because that's what we're expecting the other team to do? You know, can you do that for us and help us warm up more specifically, you know, for our upcoming opponent? So we got to use them for that as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing though, because you said like just to scout what or to get an idea of what the player is, but then the other fact, of course, also being competitive with your main team in some way. Is that second part more of the reason for having Sugar Free on? Because
yes,
I mean, right? Like it's
yes, absolutely. That's the main reason. Yeah, it's the main reason. You know, not because there's no chance that by the time he's old enough, you know, I don't know. I actually imagine Sugar Free. It's hard to imagine what his future will look like. It's too unpredictable, right?
Yeah.
But he enjoys playing the game. He's very mature for his age. He's a really, really good teammate, first of all. And then second of all, yeah, he's one of those players you can put into the scrim and the internal scrim, and it's not like he holds his own. So, you know, it's valuable. Like the scrim is valuable because everyone, you know, because it only takes really one or two like players to drag down a team. And so you really need to pay attention to every position on that team. And flex DPS, projectile DPS, it's one of the hardest positions in the world to play. It's one of the hardest positions in the world to find talent. Most of the highest paid players in the league are in the flex DPS position. The fact that Sugar Free's, 14 still.
Jeez, yeah, that's insane. I didn't.
Yeah,
Light
it
bulb,
doesn't change the fact that he can frag out. So yeah.
So because we're on the topic of the importance of contenders for teams, this is something that was kind of recent this week. This last week, the Philadelphia Fusion signed Chipsa. And there's been a lot of debate about the validity. Some people are saying it invalidates the contenders model in the sense that, hey, if you're just a big streamer and you're really good at one or potentially really good at one hero, you can make it an Overwatch League team too. Like, do you have any opinions on that? I mean, you had DeFran on your team for a while, who I think mechanically has proven himself as an Overwatch League caliber player for the most part, and can really contribute to the team, but also kind of came into light by being a larger streamer.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think DeFran's hero pool was not insane, but it wasn't like he wasn't a one trick by any means.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of proved
Great
that.
point.
By the way, in the season, just I don't think anyone was confident that he'd be able to play Zarya. I thought he played a pretty fine Zarya. And I deal with tier 2 players all the time. I know how hard they're working to try to get in the league, and I know the sacrifices that they're making to try to get into the league. That said, if Fusion wasn't going to fill that roster spot otherwise, I don't think you can really fault them for their decision. If they weren't going to go out and pick up another player, if that was really their intention to not fill that position at all, except that if they found somebody like Chipsa who has a stream and like all this other stuff, I think it's more forgivable. But I do think it hurts to see players like Leaf, like Visility, get left on the sidelines because they showed themselves to be capable on those heroes and more. So I feel for them. I really do. I think Visility in particular. Like, how does this guy, just barely miss the league every season? Yeah. It feels awful. I don't know, but I know that players are working really hard for this. At the same time, I do think that there's, on the other end of things, if you were to look at it from the perspective of the owners, they're not really here making money right now. You know what I mean? And everybody sort of has this like perspective of those teams owe it to everyone to just like keep picking up players. You know what I mean? This person deserves to be in the league and that person deserves to be in the league. Well, people need to pay for that. There's housing, there's salaries, there's travel costs now. You know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of financial considerations that go into it. And you need to be a player that brings something to the table, either overwhelming skill, where you're like a clear starter, or showing the potential to get there. And I guess they just made their decision. We're not really in a position to criticize it in the sense that we don't know exactly how confident they are in all of their other players. If they're really looking at, I'd be surprised if Chipsa actually gets stage time. I'd be surprised. But maybe he will. I don't know.
There's an offshoot chance that Doomfist is super, super important, but even then, like, I question. I mean, you've worked with players like Carpe before. These are players that can pick up things on a dime and can be very, very successful with it. So I do wonder if that would be the better solution if Chipsa is not only there for kind of dictating the news cycle, which they have. We're still talking about it, so it's putting Philadelphia in the news. It's adding more return. To the team.
I don't know.
Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. We're talking about it.
I do think there's one other important piece of the narrative, which is that everyone kind of assumes that getting into the Overwatch League as like a bench player is better than being in contenders. But it's not easy being a bench player in the Overwatch League. It's not the most fulfilling existence if you don't get eventually stage time. And so if they've really brought him in as like a perma bench boy, you know what I mean, for the most part, That's not really a situation that a lot of players covet, I don't think.
True.
Yeah.
It's also like, to be fair, there are absolutely academy slots and players that are on such low salary. By the way, I don't know how that is even legal. From a German point of view, that would never be legal to be paid $300 a month and for like 60 hours a week. But okay. Just like that promotion of at least having 50,000 plus all the benefits that a lot of people frequently miss, like especially if you're in an LA team, like having housing paid there almost doubles your salary with health insurance and whatnot. So yeah, like I feel like for some it's a big upgrade. For others, like they are very well paid very well paid contenders players as well, right?
Yeah, I didn't really mean it so much in terms of the money. I just meant it more in the fact that for the most part, these players are competitive and driven.
They want to win. They want to play.
They want to play on stream. They want to show what they got. And oftentimes, if you're a bench player on an Owl team, you never see the light of day. You never get that stream time, that stage time. And I mean, that's a reason why Kodak was excited to give up his Overwatch League contract in order to pop off at the Gauntlet with our contenders team, right? And they haven't even qualified for Gauntlet yet, but he just knew that they were good players and that if he played with them in a competition that they would do well. And that was really at its core more important to him than anything else. Yeah.
I guess that's a perfect segue to one of the more tough questions that was also topical recently. Of course, with your decision to let Enlia go and his response to that. And I think for the most part, you already spoke on it in terms of like, and I've also had it told to me from several other sources. You actually went above and beyond just sending like footage to teams and whatnot. Like it of course, there are two sides to every story, but the one thing that in your explanation I thought or didn't see addressed was that like basically what the role of a bench player is, and then also one accusation, I suppose, or one thing that Elia didn't like was that he didn't get enough or felt like he didn't get enough coach attention. So is that something that a bench player shouldn't expect, or is that something that people should take into account when being in the bench position? Just like what do you expect your bench player to do, and do you think they should be getting more attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, specifically as it relates to Endler, and I think just in general the off-season process, I think I dropped the ball on a little bit on communication, just in terms of keeping him in the loop about every single move that we're making. Mm-hmm. It's a difficult thing because a lot of the things you're supposed to be doing, you're supposed to be tight-lipped about, because if you speak of it too much, then the deals fall through because other parties get interested, or the team that has the control of the contract thinks, okay, they really want this person, let's like ramp up the price. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that go into it, right? The off season is like a very difficult process to navigate as far as like roster moves go, because of contracts and rumors and bidding wars and all that other kind of stuff, right? I don't want to say that, that said, I think it's pretty much like, it's a pretty difficult, it's a pretty obvious thing that like, it's the job of the teams to constantly be looking to improve their roster. Mm-hmm. And if a team makes a decision that they think player X is better for their team, maybe not a better player, but better for their team than player Y for whatever reason, mm-hmm. that it's kind of their responsibility to go after that. And the rosters are open all season long. People get dropped and added to rosters all the time, all throughout the season, and every player should sort of have an expectation that like, I'm always fighting for my spot. And I do think that in the same way that I didn't, I maybe dropped the ball a little bit on communicating with Enler, he also dropped the ball on communicating with me. Like it's not like if I were to pull up my DMs, I'd see like DMs from Enler, like, hey, can you tell me what my situation is? There's none of that. You know what I mean? So it's more like everybody kind of just like hoped for the best. He was focused on World Cup scrims. I was in Korea on a boot camp heading into the gauntlet, and then the gauntlet itself. Different players on the team spread out in different directions to do their World Cup stuff. Like everybody kind of went their own way and started their own thing. And then in the meantime, we're slowly working on the roster. You know what I mean? And we get Edison, and we're thinking, okay, it's going to be Edison and Enler. And then an opportunity comes up to grab Sharp, a player that we've had our eye on for a long time, but we just assumed, we're not going to be able to get him because everybody else wants him too, including Dallas, who holds his contract, right? But then we have an opportunity to get him. And so we make a decision, and it happens fairly quickly and not a lot of time to communicate what's going on. And also I didn't want to, this was like really right as World Cup is coming up. And I didn't want to get inside his head and make him perform poorly on stage either.
Sure.
Over something that wasn't even certain, because we didn't sign Sharp until after World Cup. So, it's not like we signed him and then we sat on it for like a week and we didn't tell him. Like we basically told him the moment it happened. And up until it happened, it was not a sure thing that it would ever happen. And even before it happened, I started reaching out to those teams behind the scenes saying, hey, this is something that might happen. Can you keep Enler on your radar? You know what I mean? In case it does happen. And I'll let you know in a few days whether that and there won't be a buyout or anything like that. We're going to let him go. You know what I mean? Like you'll be able to get him for whatever, with no buyout at all. It didn't work out. He's not in the league. I think he got maybe like 2 trials, but he had to play on Russian ping. It's very difficult. It was late in the trial process. Like it's a really, really shitty situation. And he's not the only player that went through this. Like,
sure.
Enler's situation is actually not even the worst. Like the worst situations are like the player, like think about like if you had a player on your roster, right? And you think that this player has like demand in the market, that other teams would want this player. So you don't want to, but you are looking to trade this player or, bring another player into the position. You don't want to let the world know that you're thinking about that because you think that you can sell this player to another team. Yeah. I mean, some of these offseason deals that happened were for like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Many hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Letting the world know that you're thinking of trading or looking to trade the player, right, can have huge financial consequences. You want to make the world think, no, we think this is the best player in the world and we want to keep him. If you want him, you better pay us a lot of money for that. So all of the incentives push in a way that sharing of information is like detrimental to the health of the team, because getting money from selling players allows you to offer more money to the players you're bringing in to stay on the team. Everybody's happier. Like it's a whole system, right? It's a lot of moving parts. So it's just very difficult. And I think having a perfect system in place, a perfectly crafted system in place is going to be very important for the following season. I hope they do something about it and make sure that like basically you can have like a functioning market while also protecting the players with timings and things like that.
Yeah. I kind of want to ask what those what some of those changes may look like, but I want to just briefly ask that again, like, because it felt like such a particular thing that also will be important for other bench players in the future. Do you think that Enler rightly feels like he was not given enough attention on the bench, or is that just something that a bench player should expect?
No, I mean, we gave him individual one-on-one coaching. We did one-on-one sessions with him. A lot of it was during GOATs when we were when he was competing with Erster for the brig stuff.
The golden
spot.
age, by the way. The golden age of Overwatch.
Yeah. We weren't happy with Enler's performance on Zarya in particular. So we really had him focus on competing for the Brigida slot. But Erster was just Erster, and he was really elegant on the hero. So Enler lost out on that. Enler was a starter for us in Stage 4. He started every single match as our May player in Stage 4. I think where he felt a little bit let down was heading into playoffs. We had already seen some of his Reaper in scrims, and we were just more confident in Baby Bay, and we felt that we relied a lot on Baby Bay's communication as well. Both Baby Bay and DeFran were basically strong communicators for the team. If you know our players at all, like Erster, for example, is like a very quiet player in the comms. So, as far as having and Enlair is like in the middle. And Baby Bay and DeFran are both very vocal, and they sort of bend the team around their will, right? So we kind of needed a little bit of that leadership. So we made kind of like a pretty quick decision that Baby Bay and Reaper was the play for us. We didn't like Baby Bay on May, so and that meta was like a little different. But when it came to goats and like sort of fast engages and calling rotations, we thought Baby Bay was like just like a key piece of the puzzle for us. So we didn't. And it was like a very short window, right, between the end of stage 4 and the beginning of the playoffs. Like how quickly did that unfold? Like a week later, a week and a half later.
Yes.
So there wasn't a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of time to like test people out on Reaper and stuff like that. So I think where Enlair felt a little bit let down towards the end of the season, because he had been the starter in stage 4, and then he went from being a starter to being back on the bench. It's just the fact that like we made a decision that we needed Baby Bay's communication to carry us through the playoffs, and we didn't give Enlair like a really really thorough vetting on Reaper to see if he could compete for the Reaper spot. We made that decision within like a day or two, basically, of scrims.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, you guys started a lot earlier on that patch. I mean, you kind of came out publicly and talked about like, hey, like we're actually gonna take these couple matches and practice for them as much as we can, but we're really focused on playoffs. So it sounds like that was made even before the decision to focus on the PTR patch and really iron out what you guys wanted to do for playoffs. Would that be correct?
We weren't the only team that did that. I would say
100%.
Half of the teams basically did that, and the only teams that didn't were the ones that their results were
still in contention.
Right, and so like all the teams that were like really guaranteed for the playoffs, like they did that as well. Really, what made it unique for us is the fact that we weren't guaranteed to be past the play-in tournament, and so we took that risk, right? But a lot of teams we had lots of scrim partners, to play on the new patch, even a week before, because a lot of teams were just focused on the playoffs. Yeah.
Kind of hope that people are a little bit more transparent with that in the future, because like you could kind of assume that people are looking forward, like there's really no reason for them to try is a strong word, but to invest so much practice time in the current patch when it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to change the playoff structure for you. You might be able to fight for maybe a better seed, but it doesn't really affect your standing all that much to win or lose these last couple of games. You could assume that they are practicing for the PTR, but you guys came out and actually said like, hey, this is our plan, this is kind of our roadmap to the playoffs, and we are taking this risk, but this is what we're doing. And I think I genuinely think that people were pretty appreciative, and it was kind of interesting to see like actually without assumption what a team like Atlanta's doing.
So I do think that there is still like a lesson to be learned though here. Obviously, like internally we can communicate more with our players and even give just swear them to secrecy, but give them all every thought process that we're going through, right? Hopefully there's just a better system in place next time around. But I do think that just in general, being a bench player in an Overwatch League team is like a difficult proposition, because you, as a coach, you have to make decisions. Okay, how do I allocate my coaching resources? Because there's only so much to go around. Do I try to improve the players on the bench? Do I try to improve the players on the starting roster? How much individual VOD review do we do with each one of them, right? The fact that bench players basically don't improve that much on their own personal skills, but just by queuing up in ranked, which is what Enlair had to do a decent amount of last season during stages 1 through 3 when he wasn't in the starting GOATS roster, right? Was to just queue up in ranked. That's not the best practice in the world to develop your talent, right? And so we're looking at this upcoming season, Atlanta, as basically we want to tackle the problem of being a bench player in the Overwatch League. We did it a little bit last season with some of our players, the players that were lucky enough to be on our academy team, right? But for the players that weren't, basically Enlair and Fried, and then Daco, right? When Daco and Fried were like those three guys basically were not in the position where they were playing on our academy team, and they were just basically on the bench queuing ranked when they weren't in the starting lineup. And they were the ones who had their skills not developed the most, right? Because they weren't actively scrimming every single day. we're trying to do something about this upcoming season. We're actually basically filling out our roster. Like basically we looked at it and we said, okay, we have a 10-man roster. So we have a responsibility to the 4 guys that are not starting to make sure that their skills don't atrophy. We've taken that responsibility upon ourselves. So then we doubled down on our investment. We're going even further. Now we're going to go to 12. So we are going to have a 12-man roster. And that's not public news, but there you go. There's some juice, right?
There's an exclusive.
And in having that 12-man roster, our goal is to make sure that not only do we have an A team, right, our starting lineup screaming on a regular basis, but that anyone who's not on the starting lineup for any given meta, that the other 6 players are basically also screaming all the time, almost as much as the main team, right? Trying to constantly push and develop their skills and compete and showcase themselves, to get on the starting lineup in whatever meta we're currently in, or if not do that, then when the meta shifts to something slightly more in that player's favor, that they're ready, that they're warmed up, that they've been improving this whole time. So we're making a huge investment in the upcoming season to make sure that our bench players basically are some of the most developed bench players in the league. But we couldn't quite do that as well last season. We did it for the players that were on the academy team, Gator and stuff. But with this season, we want to try to basically fulfill our promise to every single player, with Endler, I guess, as a learning example,
Kind of tangentially related, towards the beginning of the show, we talked about, travel and practice. And you mentioned that, some of these teams are developing their systems and their establishments that are going to have to be around ready for the time of the league. Now kind of coming back to your announcement of the 12-man roster and whatnot, how are you as a head coach really kind of or looking at practice in 2020 with all the travel and with a 12-man roster, trying to facilitate as many people as you can? And it sounds like you're facilitating all of them, or at least trying to. What is that? What are some of the difficulties in planning that? Is this something that you're really taking a serious look at? Is there anything that Atlanta's doing maybe differently than other teams in the league? Could you speak on any of that?
I mean, it's not easy because you have to travel every single weekend.
Sure.
We are fortunate in the sense that most of our games happen in North America. We are one of the few lucky teams that don't do a ton of international travel. What that really effectively means for us is that after we finish a homestand weekend, I think we are one of those teams that has the flexibility to basically go back home that Sunday, right? Take the following Monday off, right? And then practice again from like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, hop a plane either Thursday night or Friday morning and get ready for the next homestand in whatever city, and because it's all sort of mostly domestic travel or, North American travel,
sure.
This is all kind of doable, right? But for the teams that are having to do lots of international travel, I actually question whether they can really do that. That seems like too much flying. Right. So what they might have to do is, at least in some, maybe not the entire season, but some portions of the season, they might basically need to go from like one city straight to the next city, right? And then basically have some sort of setup in that city where like they're practicing there, and the host teams are providing some practice facilities. But if I were in that specific situation of basically traveling internationally from city to city, getting my guys as much computer time as possible in whatever city is like hugely important. Like these guys are used to being on the computer 12 hours a day or more.
Yep.
And that's how they stay warm and stay fresh, is always having access to a computer. When they land in whatever city, there needs to be machines like ready to go for them, and I think teams that drop the ball on that for whatever reason, I think those teams, it'll showcase in poor performance on stage.
Yeah. Especially like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were definitely homestands where certain players felt like they weren't quite as equipped and the amount of slots weren't enough. And I think like one thing that makes sense, but is also a little bit weird, is that Blizzard schedules the scrims, right?
They like So I heard about a little bit of that with contenders or something. I mean, in Overwatch League, basically you get access to a practice area for certain time slots, basically.
Sure.
But it's not like 24/7 access, right?
Right.
And so that just makes it difficult. You know, this scrim time is great, but really after scrims are over, these guys want to continue to play games, right? Otherwise they get cold, you know.
Yeah.
Just being able to sit down at the PC for like maybe on match day, just the 2 hour is fine, right? But like the other practice days of the week, right? The Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Imagine if Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, heading up to a homestand, right, weekend, that you only had 4 hours of computer access each day. You think that player is going to be looking like 100% on Saturday? Probably not. You know.
Right.
So
not to mention being a little stir crazy.
That's the challenge. Yeah.
I also think if this chairgate thing that we had last season, where players were really annoyed with the chairs, if that taught us anything, I think it's not like we're flying modules around. And from what I've heard, there's not like an exact rule book how tall the tables have to be at every single homestand venue, or what the chairs will look like, or like maybe there's probably something, I would hope so, in terms of the PCs that are provided, and that also depends on the sponsor, I suppose.
As far as I know, that all the PCs are going to be, it's going to be this standardized across every market, and the PCs provided even for the practice areas are going to be the same ones that are on stage. So
that's good.
But I think there's certainly player types where it feels like they need to create the environment around them. You know, they have like the ruler with them. And then
I mean, what was it? Was it Flash?
Flash. Historically, you know, in Brood War, he pulls out that was the kind of the meme back in the day. He would measure out exactly how far the distance was between him and the monitor, and how tall the monitor was, and where he sat in the table. Yeah, it's something that players do. I mean, I wouldn't doubt certain players in the Overwatch League. I mean, even kind of going to a more minuscule level, you know, certain players take off their shoes. Yeah, makes them feel more at home, makes them feel comfortable.
Elbow space. A lot of players talk about how many inches they have left to right. You know, because they're worried that their cord, or when they do like a big like arm motion, that they just like they'll like slap the guy next to them, basically. You know what I mean? If it's too cramped, right? So,
I do that on purpose usually. I look for an extra long cord slack just so I can just
you can whip
give the
people.
person over here a good old smack. Imagine it's Yiska all the time. I don't know why.
Always me? Why not Joe?
I can't. Joe's a teddy bear.
Do you guys remember the picture of DeFran's chair? It was like a chair, and then it had like a post-it note, like DeFran on it. It was basically a stage chair. We got him a stage chair at Overwatch League where they took the armrests off. Because what he does is after basically every time he dies, okay, he puts his hands like down by his sides, and he repositions himself in the chair, right? And like the armrests kind of get in the way of him doing that, right? But it's like a mental tick for him. It's like, oh, I died.
Yeah.
Hang on, let me reset. You know? Yeah. And if he keeps bumping into the armrests, it tilts him. Right. So basically we had to give him a chair without armrests, man. But that had to be a special request with the league. Right. Now imagine having to do that at a bunch of different homestands, 9 different homestands.
But I mean, it's like a regular athlete with their shoes or baseball glove or whatever, right? Like it's funny. We can make jokes about it, but like I totally get it. I would hate that.
There's an amazing anecdote from like, I think 2016 Overwatch, and it wasn't Pro Talk when it was actually good. And some player just goes, and then the mouse gates and like customizing your mouse. And one guy just goes, oh yeah, I do a lot of customization on my mouse. Oh yeah, I sandpaper the clicks so they're more smooth. Every time I get a new mouse, I sandpaper it. And that became like a huge meme for a while. It's just crazy to what extent people.
By the way, you just gave me a business idea.
Yeah, or just like filing off a bit of the mouse, so it's a couple of grams lighter. It's just insane to what type of customization players will go to.
I can't remember what player it was, but I think someone in Overwatch League Season 1, I can't remember the player now, like they had like multiple mice, or they'd like to use multiple mice for different heroes. So like if they were like on Genji, they'd want to use one mouse, and if they were on Soldier, they'd want to use a different mouse. But yeah, it's
What?
just it gets out of control, like some of the individual ticks that these guys have.
Yeah.
I bust out my Naga for my high advanced heroes, and then I just use my. Yeah, I get it. I'm basically an Overwatch League player, is what I'm hearing.
Okay. Yeah, just keep flexing the $200 mouse on it, dude.
Yeah, I got it right here. That's it. That's actually why the show exists. Usually, it's just to be able to flex that. So I do want to transition a little bit, Brad, to maybe we'll snag a time machine for a second. I mean, you've built I would say some of the most memorable and iconic semi-Western competitive Overwatch rosters. You're known for your scouting ability. That much is true. You've definitely demonstrated it here. Like a big part of what makes the rosters that surround you good is perform well is your ability to scout them. Can you give us some just insight? I mean, I'm not telling you to sell us the secret sauce here, but like, why do you think that in Overwatch you've been coaching for a long time? Why you think over some other coaches you've kind of demonstrated success consistently throughout your entire career? Why are you so good at your job?
Do you want to take a seat on this couch? Just lay down. This is a psychoanalysis part of the podcast.
I guess I think it's mostly probably just basically not doing it all myself. Like a willingness to collaborate with everybody that I'm surrounded by. If you were to ask your players, they'll have an opinion on who they think is good. If you were to ask your other coaches, they'll have an opinion on who they think is good. Learning to filter through all of that is very important, obviously. But I think at the end of the day, if you do successfully filter through everyone's feedback, you can get like a lot of insights that you don't get just by yourself, just like watching a VOD by yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you try to just take the burden on yourself alone, you'll miss a million things, you know? We could trial with a player, and for like 2 hours we do a tryout, right? And then after the tryout, we go talk to the players, and like just it's like almost guaranteed that somebody will mention something that you didn't see. You know what I mean? And that the other coaching staff didn't see. Like a player will say something that they noticed from their end, right? Or like some other coach will mention something that they saw. And so really it's a very collaborative process, to be honest with you. The success at Shock and at Atlanta isn't really due to me alone. It's due to a collaborative process. And so really the success is a testament to everyone at both orgs, I think, more, and as evidenced by the fact that after I left Shock, they continued to do very well at recruiting even newer talent. So I don't think I can take all the credit, not by a long shot. And I think also
51%. No, I'm just kidding.
I think also a willingness to take a chance on younger players. Back in Selfless, one of the first, at the time that I was roster building in Selfless, the conventional wisdom was don't get players off the ladder. They are not built. They don't know how to play this game at like a high level as like a team. At a competitive level, these guys have no clue. You ask most of the players at the time, they basically shit talked ladder players like they were garbage. You know what I mean? And everyone's giving me advice on how to build the roster, and it's all like, yeah, get this guy. He just got released from this team, and get this guy. Like, he's a free, now. And I was just thinking to myself, like, I don't want any of those shitters. You know what I mean?
Now I see where Dog makes it.
There's no way that you're telling me that guy's the best that we can do. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It was more just like, okay, let's dive into like ladder stats, and let's find people, and let's like look on streams, and like let's try to eye test as many people as we can, and like we have found players basically looking at rank stats, believe it or not. Like, like it's been a thing because it's such a large sample size, right? Like you've got like hundreds of games.
Yeah.
And so if this guy's numbers clock in a little bit higher, you know what I mean, on accuracy or whatever, it tells you a little bit of something. Now maybe you get them into. Now you don't use that as the reason to pick them up. You use that as the reason to get them to a tryout, and then you pull them into the tryout, and you're like, oh, this guy just body shots tanks all the time. That's why his accuracy is so high. Okay, that explains.
I feel personally called out by that, by the way.
Yeah, I bet. So that explains that little piece of data, right? But like, then you bring him to the tryout, and it's like, oh, he's just hitting headshots and squishies, and his aim is just insane. It's like, okay, just let us, this led us to that, you know what I mean? And now we can make a better choice from there. So, but yeah, I think just a willingness to take a chance in young players like Sinatra, like Super, Erster, Popo, Daco. I mean, the list goes on.
Never heard of him.
Gator's like 23. Yeah, Gator's not. Well, I mean, just across the board. Yeah, across the board,
Generally
just young players.
Yes.
Yeah.
Players that might not have had the opportunities, young in their careers, and then building around them and setting up a system or a plan, which I think is very evident in your track record, looking at Selfless and talking about, being a little bit more unconventional, maybe even trying different styles, even looking at some of your Overwatch League success. I think Atlanta, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit more on the creative side of things, willing to try different things. I think in general, you've built a solid plan, not only for the future of your rosters, looking at Sinatra and Super, Gator, and the willingness to invest in your contenders team. Would you say that that would be a measure of your success? Is that something you're very cognizant of when you're in the building phase of teams and even planning strategies? Is it very systematic? Is it about the future? Is it about like a solid system, kind of trusting the system almost?
I think it's basically you look at the strength of their mechanics, okay, and you look for like small signs of intelligence in the plays that they make, and or big signs, small and big, right? Yeah. But you look for all the little things, okay, and if their biggest flaw as a player is like, oh, they don't communicate enough, or oh, they don't talk enough, or like, oh, they're weak on this one little thing, you know what I mean? Like at some point you have to say, basically, it's about faith in personal growth. I believe in a lot of these players that are like unpolished, that like given enough practice and enough time and some maturity, that they will grow into become insane players. Dante at the start of season 1 on Shock had a fairly limited hero pool, basically only good at flanking heroes. Didn't talk that much, was pretty quiet in the comms. And as the season went on, his comms increased by a factor of, I'd say, 250%. I think by the time he hit the off season heading into season 2, he was at like 3 times where he originally started. You know what I mean? Like his comms just went up so much, right? And he also made it a goal to like improve his hero pool. So he started just in his free time practicing all kinds of other heroes, right? And he's not alone in that. Like a lot of players basically do this. A lot of players, like Sugar Free, used to not say a word. Now the guy communicates what's important, what's relevant, when it's relevant. He calls things out. You know what I mean? Like this is just like the growth that each one of these guys go through once they're on a team long enough. And it's also the very important growth that happens when you're just scrimming on a regular basis, which is why, going back to that B team thing, we think it's so important for our bench players to get basically regular scrim time heading into next season. So it's just, we're gambling on young players, talented players, and not even just young players, also not young players who just haven't been given a good enough shot. Like Gator was not exactly young, but Gator leveled up so much on Atlanta Academy that, like we think, like whereas before we were looking at Popo as basically like clearly better, now we think Gator's gone through like a very strong growth process here, where like, even though he's not like some 18-year-old kid, you know what I mean? Like he basically still improved a shit ton, and he has it in him to compete for the starting spot now, so
great.
I think it's just it just comes down to experience. If you think that the biggest thing this player is missing is experience, that's not like a deal breaker, not at all.
Give it to him. Yeah, for sure. I do have a question, because you had mentioned how important it was for the people around you, and how it makes, at least around scouting, it's a very collaborative experience. How about your new addition of Mentalist from South Korea? Like, what is he bringing to the table for the Atlanta Reign right now?
Well, he brings a lot of things. We actually we did not. No, we got Edison without, like, it's not like we signed Edison and Mentalist as a package deal.
Okay.
We signed Edison first. Okay.
Okay.
And then, one of the things we didn't have on the Atlanta Reign last season was a Korean coach. We had 3 Korean players, and we had a Korean translator who lived with us, but we didn't have a Korean coach. And it wasn't like a deal breaker. Like, we still did very well, right? But when you go from one season to the next, if you're lucky enough to not be having to do like a total rebuild, and you just want to improve on the little things, right? Having a Korean coach that could basically communicate with our Korean players more often, more frequently, and more fluidly, we think would be like a strength. Like, if we have a coaches meeting early in the morning and we're for an hour and a half, we're kicking around ideas and thoughts and things like that, right? Being able to have somebody basically absorb all of that and then find moments later in the day to deliver some of it, you know what I mean, that are like just opportune, as opposed to full stop, can you translate this please, you know what I mean? Like, it's smoother, right? So that's what we're hoping for there. Mentalist is a very hard worker, very smart person. He's done a lot of work even remotely already. He's grinding hard on the English lessons, you know what I mean? He's doing all of that. And then, yes, on top of that, he has a strong relationship with Edison. And, we wanted all of our Korean players to become more comfortable this season. But of course, Edison is basically, we have a very like established team already. Lots of people already know each other. You know what I mean? Like, we've already done a lot of things together. Regardless of whether or not Edison's Korean or not, he's a new player coming into an environment that's already established. If we can bring someone with him that he's familiar with, that he has a relationship with it, that he can feel more at home with, that's a plus too. It's like a bonus at the end. It's not what we made our decision around, but it's like, Mentalist checked all of the other boxes, and then this is like just gravy on top, so.
Yeah. That, like, Joe had this concept for a long time, and we just coined it like the mother duckling effect, where a lot of players seem to follow their coaches around, and this seemingly intangible effect that you also talked about on sort of like in the with the academy roster, where you just really know what the player is about, right? We have all this talk in the scene about nepotism and cronyism and whatnot, but really, like, it feels like there's most of the reason why these people follow is just like there is predictability in what you can expect from these players, and also where you could see improvements, right? So, like, this effect of it often happening, and I don't know, Joe, if you kept count, but it happened dozens of times this offseason that you could trace certain moves back to the
to a coach. That has been signed or is in the future of signing. It does not always necessarily the reason why a player is signed, but it's an interesting, pattern that's popped up.
I think, again, you learn things about players as you coach them. I knew Funny Astro was good just from like his stream and from his, ladder performance and stuff, right? Like, I knew he was good before we picked him up. But only after I lent a hand coaching Atlanta Academy, and then obviously went with them to the Gauntlet and stuff, only then did I realize really just how insane of a player he is, right? And how good of a teammate he is. And that's something that I wouldn't have gotten basically if he hadn't been on my team and I attended 10 plus scrims with him. And you just see his leadership like shine, and so I think Fusion has made an amazing pickup in Funny Astro. I think he will just, no matter how good or bad, the other players on that team perform, whether they regain former glory or whatever, just having Funny Astro on the team, I think, is going to be insane for them. Okay. But I only know that now from the benefit of basically having worked with Funny Astro. And when you're out there building a roster, especially if you're building from scratch, there's so much uncertainty out there. Like, Atlanta in season 1, we basically did tryouts in season 2, our first season. In season 2, we did tryouts where we invited like 100 players. And we did our best basically in those tryouts to basically record as many VODs as we could and see as much as we could. But even that only told us so much, right? This past season, we didn't even do trials because there was like this sort of arms race to basically go out there and sign the best talent. Like, you're out there trying to schedule like a tryout and teams are already out there making offers, right? So only like half the teams, not even half, I think probably even less than half of the teams actually did tryouts this season. It's probably around half. And the other half just were like, we got to like move fast to sign this guy. Otherwise we're going to lose out, So the whole process this offseason was a little wonky. There wasn't really like open tryouts for every single team. There was only open tryouts for basically the teams that were like rebuilding cheaply and things like that. Like, it was very much one of those types of off seasons. And I think that's bad for players, but that's basically what was demanded. Like, we wouldn't have necessarily gotten Edison if we waited too long, to move on them. So yeah.
So you feel like, kind of wrapping up, do you think that that's more of like a case by case study on where and when you should be trialing players versus just immediately kind of like shooting from the hip and taking a chance on somebody? You think it's kind of, based on the person, based on where your team's at?
I mean, I think it speaks to the overall reason for having an academy team. Again, getting to know these players ahead of time, making your building knowledge about the players that are out there basically throughout the entire season as best you can. Always asking for VODs, always looking to get info, you know what I mean? So that you're not just relying on like this 1 week window to make big decisions. You kind of want to have a big game plan going into the off season, which we did.
And I suppose like one of those suggestions, do you think it would be a good idea to just like tremendously, or just like for not tremendously, but a couple of weeks delay the signing window where everyone can just start trialing and has some time to make decisions, and then it turns more into a more secure players market situation?
Give me the combine, Yiska. Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to just give me the combine that Nate Nanzer promised me.
Yeah, but do you think like, because the signing window opened fairly quickly after the season, especially for teams that had gauntlets going on as well, right? So do you think like just like opening it up later would have helped?
So it's very difficult, and I do think that under a slightly different scenario, players could benefit more, but there's a lot of logistical issues as well. Okay, so for example, right now we don't have completed visa paperwork for most of our players because the visa process is like ridiculous, and the lawyers
not even trolling much.
They have been working on it. They're continuing to work on it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of hit or miss. We have a contenders player that is like basically on his like 7th month of waiting for a visa.
Jeez.
Overwatch League system is obviously a little bit more robust. Has a lot more notoriety to it. So Overwatch League visas are easier, but there have been issues in the past. We've all heard about them. At the end of the day, if you wait too long to open up the signing window, once you sign a player, there's a question mark as to whether or not the visa will be ready in time for them to actually practice with their team in the preseason, right? And then be ready to compete. So there's that to factor in. There's also the fact that like basically the teams that got eliminated from the season early and didn't have to do a postseason, that all of those guys get a head start in their process, right?
Yep.
But the people that need to stay, that are basically make a deep run and need to stay focused on the playoffs, and then forget on top of that, the teams that go to the finals, which is what, like 2 weeks later, like those teams, those teams start their process so much later because they're just focused on winning. They're not focused on roster building in the postseason,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of considerations there. But I do think at the end of the day, something where you move up the team option window. So that would be helpful in the sense of not only does the player get clarity, on whether they're a free agent or not, but also the teams that are building their rosters have more definitive answer on who's available, right? Like if like a player like Enlair, like, you know, if some team knew about Enlair 3 weeks earlier, in that 3-week window, did they sign a hit scan player? You know what I mean? And now they can't go back on their decision? Possibly. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's very difficult. But then on top of all of that, there was World Cup going on. So like a lot of EU players went home to practice with their World Cup teams. So can they even trial on North American servers successfully? You know what I mean? For some other team, if they're getting told about it. So it's just like the scheduling has to be very carefully thought out, in my opinion. And the devil's in the details. But I do think the system could have been better. Yeah, this season.
Yeah.
I think more so than probably at any other season, a lot of the decisions made pre-season will have effect on the main season. Just like first and foremost because of the visa situation, right? Where like you probably can't fix holes as quickly and as seamlessly because it takes so long to get a visa going for all these places that you might theoretically end up with. And then even worse for the teams that have to travel a lot and across different continents even. I think a lot of seasons will be predetermined, or for a lot of cases for some teams now. Would you agree? All right.
Yeah. I mean, the lawyers are telling us, that basically that this is a process that needs to be started on now, just to be safe. Some things will be easier than others. Some teams will have it easier than others. But the problem is that everything about these visas is basically person to person, and there can always be snags in the system. And so, it's just a very difficult process, unpredictable to a point, and that's why I think, I don't know. It's just you got to do the best you can with it, but you have to absolutely do the best you can with it. Otherwise, it's going to be even worse.
And it's definitely to an extent a gamble because, like, I would say, and that has always been my impression, is that there are just inherent talents in some players, or maybe not even inherent, but very, very hard to earn talents that when a meta just gets lucky for them, they're just on. Right. And if you have them then on the team, then it's really good to have those. And you can just gamble into good meta situations. Arguably, that's how season 1 was mostly decided. And the best you can do is just like prepare for as many scenarios as could potentially turn up. But I still think they are like the large majority of scenarios are unpredictable. So mostly gambling.
I hope it's Genji meta. I think we all just want the free carry from Erster.
That would be fun to see. After seeing him play in China, that'd be a nice return to his hero pool, let's say. So yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna go ahead and end it here. That's a perfect place to end it. Erster's Genji is where we end all podcasts. It's actually the word of the day. If you say Erster's Genji, we have to end the show no matter what. So, Brad, first of all, thanks so much for being here, man. It was great. Very insightful. I see competitive Overwatch is already just like churning out the clips. So thanks for providing us for the our competitive Overwatch content for the day.
No problem.
Appreciate it. I do want to ask you before we go. So
I was muted.
Sorry. Yeah. No.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Good.
Before you go, I do have one last question for you. It's a hard hitter. Some people are saying Atlanta Reign, great Overwatch League 2020 team. Others are saying greatest Overwatch League 2020 team. I need to know where you fall on this one.
We'll find out at your spawn door, I guess.
Hey.
All right, here we go. All right, we'll take it for what it is. Brad, before we get out of here, shout outs. Where can people find you? Anything you want to say to those Atlanta Reign fans out there? All that stuff. Let's get it all out there right now.
I don't plug anything. I don't care.
Okay.
I
Fair
do
enough.
love the fans, and excited to see you guys in Atlanta later this year, next year.
No joke. There's a very good chance I'm going to be at a Atlanta homestand this year. So I happen to be down in Florida. My mom's like 2.5 hours away, and I happen to be there the very week that one of the homestands are. So I'm like, I might bring my mom with me to esports.
Well, if you want special treatment, I'm gonna have to see Atlanta swag. If you just come in a t-shirt, you're not getting the special treatment.
So I'm gonna be real with you. I kiss ass. Like I said, you told me not to buy the jersey.
Well,
but
but now you do.
I have to buy the Sephy jersey. So now I need to know what number. What number do I get for the Sephy jersey?
I don't know. I don't care.
You gotta promise him though. Last time he bought a Curry Shot jersey, and that held topical for about 2 months upon buying it. So if you can make it 3 months before starting to coach Soul or something, that would be swell.
Why did you have to bring that up?
It's a collector's item. You're fine.
My wife is clipping all this so that when we go over our budget next month, she's going to be like, remember that jersey you bought?
Remember this?
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, Brad, for being here. Huge, I can't thank you enough. Great insights all around. Yiska, what about you, man? Like, shout outs for the week. Where can people find you? Go ahead.
So I think I can talk about it now because it's on the website anyway. I found a new publication. First piece is going up tomorrow. It's called GG Intel. And yeah, I'm looking forward to write content for them, especially more regularly. Like this year, I'm definitely going to have some. And then next year, hopefully more actively.
Awesome. Joe, what about you? Shout outs for the week. Where can people find you?
All on the socials at Volamel. That's Volamel. Still working on the video for this week for alternate Overwatch history, but I think I have nailed down a topic. It's going to be around Sinatra, somebody that Brad is very, very familiar with, and maybe a different scenario on where he might end up for season 1 of the Overwatch League. So we'll have to see exactly what that looks like. But yeah, doing some writing things, got some projects out there. But yeah, stay tuned on the YouTube and on the Twitter for all the writing stuff.
Awesome. As for me, you can find me everywhere at KickedTripod, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere. Just type in KickedTripod. You can find everything there, including the show, twitch.tv/KickedTripod, youtube.com/KickedTripod, or just search for Tactical Crouch anywhere. You will find the show. No new patrons this week, and I apologize if I missed it. I've been moving this last week, so there's some like weirdness with my normal, like, how do I make sure I'm up to date with things? But we do have one new 5-star iTunes review from Great Britain.
Oh, wow.
The greatest of Britons, from Josh3854. Thank you so much for the 5-star review. I appreciate it. If you like the show and want to support, go to patreon.com/tacticalcrouch. Great place to support. We have lots of great tiers, including a game night, which we're going to have to do very soon for December. And then if you're like, hey, I'm watching on Twitch, use your Twitch Prime sub, whatever else, here. Great place to do it. We've got our own patron subs, which are patron channels, right? Where a lot of the questions that we got from today actually came from the patrons, which is pretty cool. So if you like the show and want to be a part of that and kind of get more one-on-one not conversations, but like more one-on-one time with the host and potentially with the guests, that's a great place to do that. Otherwise, that's it. That's all I got for you. Thanks again, Joe, Yiska, for being here, and of course, Brad, for providing us with the insight and everything else. We'll see you guys next week, 11 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, twitch.tv/KickedTripod for episode 65. This has been episode 64. We'll see you guys later. Bye. Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.